Hi, everyone. Welcome to this module. So in the last module, we talked about building a rig, a very basic rig that allowed us to move our heads around with the track pose, and we were able to attach controller, or we were able to set up our controllers to move and turn, and we even did a little teleportation, right, where we would set up teleportation for around our scene. We're going to continue with that. So today we're going to build a rig. It's going to be a more, what's the word? It's going to be a more built out rig where I'm going to show you guys how to add uh, Ray interactors to your rig, how to put on like virtual gloves and that kind of stuff. So here we have exercise one, and I got this scene here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to build a rig. Okay. I'm going to warn you that this particular exercise is going to take a little longer than some of the other ones. So let's start from scratch. The rig, we're going to start by building what's referred to as an XR rig. Okay. You read anything about VR, people talk about this. All right, the XR rig is the player within the VR world. Okay, so the idea is like, okay, I have this VR world, right? Where exactly are we? Are we over here? Are we over there? Are we over here? And the answer is that's what the XR rig is for. It basically tracks information from the headset and also information today we're going to talk about with the controllers. And this is going to allow us to look around and move and teleport. So we have to know like where is this thing in the world, and that's really what the XR rig is for. Okay. Now we could build all this from scratch. We're actually just going to take advantage of some basic stuff that's already built into Unity. One of the things that you're going to need today, just in case you don't have it, is I want you guys to have the samples folder downloaded from your package manager. So remember when we set up this, we got into the package manager and I asked you guys to install the XR toolkit. If you're in a newer version of Unity, your toolkit should look something like this. You can see it was last updated in November. And I'm going to go under samples, and there's this area called starter assets, and I've already downloaded that. Okay, and the reason why I want that is it actually has some things we're going to use. Just one thing that's going to make working with buttons a lot faster, and that is there's this thing called the XR default actions that we're going to use. It may be automatically added for you, but just in case it isn't, I just want to show you where it is. Okay. All right, so let's start from scratch. I'm going to start by going into my world here, and I'm going to go to game object XR, which is for VR related components. And I'm going to go down to where it says XR origin VR. Okay. I like to call this headset sometimes because I think that's easier for people to understand what this really is, but this represents the character in the world. And when we built that, you can see what it really did was it added a camera. So it added a element into my hierarchy called, or it was originally called XR Origin. I renamed it VR headset. Usually when people talk about this, they're going to call it the XR rig or XR Origin. There is another thing called camera offset, and then I have the actual camera. This is what the player is going to see when they're inside of the world. The VR headset has two components or two scripts already applied to it. One is called the XR Origin, and one is called the Input Action Manager. Okay. The XR Origin is this is the script that the program, the Unity world, uses to figure out where this is in relation to everything. Okay. Inside of this, so if you go under origin game object, Just make sure this is set to the main XR origin. In this case, I renamed it VR headset, so it's called that. If there wasn't, you could literally, I can't even set it to not it, but it's not even letting me not turn it on. But if for some reason this was empty, you could just literally drag this in and that would do the same thing. The camera floor offset should be set to camera offset. This camera offset is in case we need to move any of the elements in relationship to the main parent, we can do that. Like if I needed to move this camera, I can do that in relationship to the whole thing. If this camera, or if the camera was applied directly to this, I wouldn't be able to move it without moving the whole thing. So this is so that you can kind of, play around with placement a little bit. The camera object, the one thing it really has here, so it has a camera like we've talked about in terms of VR or Unity in general. It has an audio listener. This is what brings in the audio. And it has that track pose driver, and it's actually already set up for you. So what it's tracking is the rotation and position of your headset. Okay, what it's doing is actually basing it off your eyes and your eye movement to tell what direction you're looking at and whether you're turning or not. Okay. So this is probably already set up for you, position input and rotation input. So that's good. That already sets up a lot of stuff for us. And if I go back to headset, it says input action manager. What this is for is input is like information we're giving to the program. So like these buttons, if I hit the X key, or this is the A key, sorry, the A button, the B button, the controller, these triggers here, what does that do in the program? So this is going to handle that. Okay. And so what we need to do is, in case this is not set, let's just say hypothetically it's set to nothing, I want to use the default buttons. The reason why we do this is I could script all of this myself, but it's a lot of work. This XR defaults kind of does all of that. It kind of loads in a lot of script that already sets up all of my buttons automatically. And so it's really just a nice time saver. So I'm just literally going to drag that in. Now, when you make it from here, if you already have the samples installed, it probably will already do that for you. But just in case it doesn't, All right, so if I were to, if we were to go to build profiles and build this world, what would happen is you'd be able to look around the world, but you wouldn't be able to move. Okay. Now, what we want to do is be able to move. So how do we move? Like, and by move, I mean move from like, when I talk about moving, not just moving your head like this, I mean moving from one place in the world to another. So to do that, we need to add what's called locomotion. Okay. The locomotion mediator allows the rig to move physically in the space like this. Okay. So what I'm going to do is, with the main parent highlighted, I'm going to create an empty child, and I'm going to call it locomotion. Now this is an empty, but I'm using this to hold some other components or other scripts we're going to need. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to add in locomotion, or locomotion mediator. Use this one over the locomotion systems. The locomotion systems is the old way. It's an older script. And some of it is a little bit outdated. So we're going to use the locomotion mediator. Now, when it does that, you'll notice that it adds the locomotion mediator and it puts in a script. And it also adds this other thing called the XR body transformer. The XR body transformer is setting up aspects about the player, including like the height of the player. Is the player going to collide with other things in the scene, like the walls I have here and stuff like that? What we're going to do is, so make sure this is set to your rig. This is my rig. I'm just going to click on add character controller and make sure use character controller has been turned on. What that actually did is it's going to set up a character controller on your main parent. So it has things like the height in meters. This is how tall we are. This is the radius. The radius is like, does your object collide with things? if any of these things need to be moved, you can, move these around in relationship to the headset. So like right now, the camera, like if for some reason, um, if I wanted to move this, I could use the camera offset to move the camera. See how it's like kind of, if for some reason you wanted the camera behind it, see how I can do that because the camera offset is separated from the character controller. If they were on this, if they're all on the main VR headset, I wouldn't be able to move them independently of each other. I kind of like them on top of each other. So I think that's probably a good spot, but just understand that. Now what I'm going to do is let's add in, we added in locomotion. Now I want to add in teleportation. So to do that, we are going to add in something called teleportation provider. This is a script that's going to allow us to now teleport. Okay. And to do that, we need to say what is going to move when we teleport. Well, we're using the locomotion mediator of this rig. So that's why I can just drag this in. If that wasn't an option, I can also click here and that should put that in there for me. Okay. All right. So we have the ability to teleport. But what we need to do now is we need to actually have a way to tell the program that we want to teleport, right? How do we do that? Well, when you guys did that sample world, you probably moved around your controller and you saw like a little ray, jump out of it. That is what we call a ray indicator, okay? So what I want to do is I'm going to teleport, but we're going to, as opposed to the teleportation happening from like maybe if I collided with something that causes it, I want it to be something that's corresponding to a button on my controller. So the thing is right now my XR rig, I would be able to look around and I could even set up something where if I collided with it, it would teleport, but I want to actually have a controller to control the ability to teleport, okay? Now, I don't have any controllers as part of our headset here, or my VR headset. So I'm going to add that. I'm going to add it to this camera offset as a child. So I'm going to go create empty child, call this right controller. So this is going to represent my right controller. Okay. Now, the first thing we need to do is we need to get information from the right controller. What kind of information? Well, how is the controller positioned, rotated? Is it rotated up? Is it rotated down? Is it forward? Is it backwards? That kind of stuff. How are we going to do that? Well, if you remember, when we did that for the camera, we used a tracked pose driver, and we can do the same thing here. So what I'm going to do is add a tracked pose driver. Okay. And what this is going to do is get the information for the rotation and position of my controller. Okay. Now here, what we need to do is we need to say, how does this information get captured? You could bind it to certain existing buttons, but what I actually want to do is use some of these existing inputs. So what I'm going to do is go under use reference. Okay. And what I'm going to do, this is going to allow me to drag and drop, or I could drag in one of these options here. I can also just click this and this would allow me to do it. So I'm going to set position input. I want to set it to the right controller. I'm going to set it to position right, or sorry, XR right, which means the right controller position. And I'm going to do the same for rotation. And I'm going to do the same for tracking state. Okay. All right. So what I've just done is I've added information to, what this will do is these are going to get information from the right controller in terms of the position, the rotation of it, and the tracking, which means when it moves and that kind of stuff. So we get that information. Now, if I were to publish this and you were to look through your world, you wouldn't, it would be tracking your controller, but the problem is you wouldn't see anything. It would just really be a bunch of data that's like, your hand was at this position, then it's at this position, then it's at this position. What we want to do is we want to set it up that if I'm moving around a point in space, we want to set it up that we can add like a digital hand to that. So if I click here, the digital hand moves there. If I click it, or if I move my hand over here, the digital hand moves over there. And that's where the ray is. So that's what we're going to do is connect our ray indicator or interactor with this data. Okay. Now, the easiest way to do this is I'm going to go under game object XR, and we're going to go something called ray interactor. And it's going to make this, and it's actually, when you make this element, you're going to see it's actually about 4 different components added to it. One called the ray XR ray interactor. I keep saying indicator, it's interactor. Sorry, I apologize. The line renderer script and the XR interactor line visual script. Okay. What I'm going to do is I want this to apply to the right controller. So I'm just going to drag it as a child of that. Okay. What this is going to do is state, this is essentially going to connect this data from here and attach it to the interactor. So this is actually describing what the interactor can interact with and what it can't interact with and what triggers the interactions. We also have these down here, these line renderers and this XR indicator or interactor line visual script. This is what stylizes the rays that you see. Normally you've seen them as like red, right, or white. This is we can play around with that. We'll talk about that in the next exercise. So for now, we're not gonna touch them, but you can change that if you want to. Now, there's a couple things we need to do here. First thing we want to do is say which hand is it set to, and let's set it to right. The next thing is what layers can my ray interactor interact with? For now, what I want to do is I want to say only elements that are on the teleport layer can it interact with. Okay. If you remember, I asked you guys previously, so if you want to do teleportation in your world, if you're going to use controllers to move forward, back, left, and right, and turn like we did last module, you don't need to do this. But if you're going to teleport, it's important to have a teleportation user layer set up. So see how it has user layer 31 and I've written teleport. Okay. And so this way, if I am going to teleport, my objects that are going to teleport have to be connected to that layer. So for instance, here, I have this green, there it is. This has a teleportation anchor, and see how that's set to teleport, and the same is for this platform. So for my ray interactor to work, that also has to be set to teleport, okay? The other thing I'm going to do is we need to do rotate and directional input of our rays, okay? So I'm going to click this and I'm going to set this to the right, and I'm going to set this to, this is rotate manipulation. And I'm going to do the same thing here for directional manipulation. Now, if I were to save and we were to preview, what would happen is you would now actually you'd see that ray indicator. But if you tried to use it, it wouldn't work. Meaning like if you pressed on the up button, it wouldn't teleport you or do anything like that. So the last thing we have to do is under input configuration, we need to tell it which button selects something. And so what we're going to do is I'm going to click here and I want to do, I'm going to do right interaction select. And then you can also select value. Oops, I put the wrong one. That's supposed to be right hand. Select value. So this is me selecting. I can also activate. Activate in this case means releasing it. And so that we're just going to use the default, which is when you let go of it. And that would be activate, right interaction, activate, and then right interaction value. Okay. All right, so what this means is now what should happen is when I press on this button, that is selecting, and when I let go of it, that is like activating basically, and so now it should work. The other thing to understand is that, the ray indicator, the ray is going to pop out of this box. So see how this is like a little bit farther away from the actual rest of the headset? So just note that if your ray seems to be further out from the hand, that's because this is probably a little bit further out. So what I'm actually going to do is move this up so it's kind of in line with the rest of the module here. All right, see how that's kind of there. The other thing I'm going to do is I want to move this whole thing back because right now it's kind of starting in the middle of the scene. And what I'm going to do is kind of put it over here. So it kind of starts on this green layer or, okay. All right, so now after all of this, I know this is a lot. Now this should work. If I were to build this, you would have a right controller. And if you pointed it, you would have a line, you'd have a white and a red line. If it's white, that means you can teleport or possibly select something. We haven't done that yet, but at least now you can you can pick stuff, you can teleport. So try that out. And if that works, great. If not, review my video. There might be something, oops, let's set that to floor. This should also be set to floor, by the way. That looks right. Everything else looks correct. Hose driver and ray indicator. Okay, so try that out. Make sure all of that works, and then come back. And essentially, the next thing is really do it for the left controller. Now, all right, everyone. So this is exercise 1. So you can see I can look around at the area I'm in. I'm on a green platform, and you can see I have the ray. Okay. And you'll notice if I point it at the ground or anywhere that's not the platform, it turns red. So you can see it is moving with my controller. And if I click here and I press up, oh, I know what I have to do. I have to fix this. But you can see that it's working. So this is with one. I'm going to set up the other one too. And so that way we'll be able to have 2 and be able to point at things and be able to interact with them, either to, eventually we'll use these to grab, and we'll can use these to teleport. We could do this all again. I'm lazy. So what I'm going to do is just literally duplicate this, call this left controller. And then essentially all you need to do is switch this from right to left, XR, right to XR left for all of these, including, the ray interactor. So change these to left, change these to left. Oops, that was already set to left. That's going to cause trouble. You do got to double check everything. There. All right. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to set all of these to left. And then that should, when I finish with that, so I'm going to set this to position, rotation, and then tracking. Same thing here. Let's set this to rotation. I'm just going to drag this in, if I'm being honest. There you go. It's a little faster. And then this should be XR select. So let's do right. Oops. That was the wrong one. That was the right hand. I need left hand. All right. I'm gonna do the other one. So I need to interact or activate. Sorry, I'm saying the wrong words. Oops, that one was already good, but this one's good. All right. So now if we save, build that just like I did, and now you should have two hands where. And by the way, um, just double check that your array indicators. Okay, they're both on the same spot. You might want them a little far from each other. Maybe I'll put this one a little bit to the right. I'll put this one a little bit to the left. Okay. You can tidy this up a little bit, but that's basically what you're going to do. So save that, and you should have two ray indicators, and I'll show you in headset. Okay. Everyone, so here's me doing the same thing. This is still exercise 1. So now I have two ray controllers, 1, 2. Both can interact with this platform. So if I use the teleporter like we did before, I'm pressing up on the joystick. Okay, and if I want to go back and go to the other side, I'm turning all the way around. Either one, press up, and I teleport. Okay, so that is setting up a very basic teleporter using Unity and the rig.